This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy.
Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I'm John Macri, joined, as always, by PFF's lead fantasy analyst, Nate the Great Jahnke. And Nate, big difference today because we are live in studio in Cincinnati, Ohio, USA. They allowed me in the country as a foreigner so that we can record our 2025 Fantasy Breakout Candidates episode in person. I'm excited to be here. How are you, sir?
I'm excited to be here too. I'm glad that we get to do this together. It's nice to be able to do this in person. It'll be a different experience. I have a nicer background than I do back at home, so excited to be here and excited to talk breakout candidates with you.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, definitely nicer background. No hockey stuff in the background. So this makes a little bit more sense, obviously, here in studio at PFF Studios here. But this is good. I think it lined up really nicely because, for one of our more, I think, fun and exciting topics of the offseason, right? Breakout candidates, where we're going to try to identify the players who are kind of on the cusp of greatness heading into this season. Like, they've shown some sparks already, but it gives us a chance to kind of get optimistic about these guys who can maybe put their game to a whole nother level this season. So I'm excited about this one. I know this is a popular off-season topic, so I think it'll be a fun discussion today.
So want to get started with the quarterbacks?
Yeah, we're going to get into the quarterbacks here, and just like a couple things, I guess, for who qualifies for the list, right? Like, we decided on no rookies. We wanted to dive a little bit deeper than that. So, just in case anybody's like, where's Ashton Jeanty or something like that, that he doesn't qualify for this conversation specifically. We're focusing on second, third, fourth year guys that have a chance to significantly increase their fantasy points or points per game, not just, an incremental one or these rookies who we expect for bigger roles right away in year one. So yeah, let's get started with the quarterbacks. Two players who I think did well last year as rookies, but I think we're both expecting much more from them in 2025. And you got the Chicago Bears jersey on today, a little bit of a foreshadowing for who's going to be on the list. So who was your first pick as a breakout candidate?
So we'll go with Caleb Williams first. We saw some sparks of it last year. He had 5 games as a top 6 fantasy quarterback last season. A couple of home games where he graded relatively well, from 75 to 83 for 4 of those games. And then the big reason for optimism is all the changes that happened in the offense this offseason. We saw Ben Johnson as their new head coach. They added Luther Burden, Colston Loveland in the draft. So we think this offense can resemble what was going on with the Detroit Lions with Ben Johnson these past couple seasons, where Jared Goff was a fantasy starting quarterback. We think this offense will be a little bit different. First off, Williams is able to run the ball a little bit more than Jared Goff, so that should help his fantasy value. Also, Chicago doesn't have the running backs that Detroit has, so potentially can be a little bit more pass heavy. At least that's what we're hoping. The only concern is he's taken a lot of sacks last year, and while they made plenty of changes to the offensive line, those changes primarily helped their run game, not so much their pass protection. So I could see him being under pressure a lot still, and hopefully he can learn to avoid those sacks a little bit better. But if not, that could be pretty rough for the offense.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think this is everything that the Bears have kind of done this offseason points to them wanting to make things at least easier for Caleb Williams and help him thrive in year 2 here, right? Like you mentioned, Ben Johnson, the improved offensive line, spending their first 2 picks on high-end receiving options as well, right? Luther Burden and Colston Loveland. So they have a really nice setup in Chicago. And then obviously, the offensive line changes have been excellent as well. So, yeah, it was, I guess, a relatively disappointing rookie season for Caleb Williams, right? Especially when you compare him to like Jaden Daniels, who really hit the ground running and established himself as this elite fantasy quarterback. So I think there's definitely room to grow. Obviously, the pressure to sack conversion rate is going to be a big part of that, right? He's holding the ball a ton. He's inviting a lot of pressure. So that part of it has to clean up. So you hope that with the offense getting better, that there's a chance that gets better, as well as Caleb Williams gets a little bit more comfortable in the NFL. So yeah, I'm with you. I think he can have a better year. I think he can push for a QB1 type season by just relying on and trusting the offense around him as well. I think he's in a great spot to succeed and be drafted as kind of a low-end QB1 right now. I think he could still outperform those expectations in 2025.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important with him is to be patient with him, because there's so many changes with the coaching staff, with the rookie receivers. Sometimes it takes the rookie receivers a little bit of time. It's a completely new offensive line that hasn't worked together. All 5 guys, everyone they're lined up with is new to them. So it's a lot of new moving parts. So even if Williams doesn't have a strong early part of his season, I think he can have a strong end to his season. So if you do draft him, just keep in mind you'll probably need another quarterback for those first couple weeks before Williams really starts to shine.
Yeah, for sure. We got to be patient with a lot of rookies, right? Sometimes we get spoiled and we get, excited. Like Jaden Daniels obviously was immediately like a great fantasy asset. But you look at even like past number one picks, right? Like Bryce Young, for example, right? It took him literally a year and a half to show any kind of signs of being worthy of that number one overall pick. So we don't want to give up on Caleb Williams just yet, especially when the offense is set up in such a nice way that he should and could thrive and succeed as soon as this season. But yeah, I'm not expecting it to necessarily happen immediately, but I think it could be something that we do see this year and then see it consistently going forward.
Yep.
So I have for my breakout pick, I went back to the 2024 rookie class as well. I went with Drake Maye of the New England Patriots, who, look, it was tough competition relative to his peers in 2024 because, like we've been mentioning, Jaden Daniels, obviously elite fantasy quarterback. Bo Nix, surprising, a top 10 fantasy option last year. And then even Caleb Williams, he salvaged a relatively disappointing season to finish as the overall QB 15 on the year. But Drake Maye was kind of behind the eight ball because he didn't start until week 6, I think it was, last year as a starter. And started to flash that fantasy difference-making potential, already a little bit heading into year 2. I think is going to be the big year for him. So he only finished as QB 21. He was tied for QB 17, I think, in points per game. But it's an improved offense in New England. We got an upgraded coaching staff, another year in the league. I think he has the potential to be a top 12 fantasy quarterback in 2025. And one of the key areas that I want to see from him to help for that to come to fruition is improvement as a passer, right? Because that's going to go a long way in him delivering that kind of high-end passing potential that he showed during his first 2 years with North Carolina in college, or I guess his last 2 years, right? But he had a 91.5 career passing grade coming out of college. That was the best mark of any quarterback in that rookie class. And it was an 89th percentile mark among 123 quarterback prospects since 2017. So it's, I think unreasonable to expect that level of play from a rookie right out the gate, right? But I think that's still within him, right? Because it better than what his year 1 passing grade might have showed, 64.9 in year 1. That ranked 31st among the league's quarterbacks last season. So there's definitely a good chance for him to improve that in year 2. And then entering a new offensive system under an offensive coordinator like Josh McDaniels, you got head coach Mike Vrabel coming in there, some slight help to the offensive line. I think a lot's going to depend on how good Will Campbell starts his career in year 1. And then, they added another former first-round pick in Garrett Bradbury to play center. So we'll look for him to kind of have this resurgence in New England. So I really want to see the passing potential from Maye. I think that's a big part of it for me. And, looking at him last year, he ranked 33rd in total throws, 20-plus yards downfield, and he had a 7.4 average depth of target, which was a bottom 10 mark in the league. And if you look at Josh McDaniels, he's typically asked for a little bit more aggression from his quarterbacks. If you look at his first year as head coach, even with Derek Carr, Derek Carr set a new career high in average depth of target his first year under Josh McDaniels and was a top 5 mark in the entire league, right? So that's an area where Drake Maye, coming out of college, I thought he showed a lot of promise because his deep accuracy in college, 45.7%, ranked 89th percentile among prospects since 2017. So I think that could be a major key in unlocking that high-end passing ability in year 2 at the next level. And then we'll see how, the wide receivers factor in. I'm not sure how much of a needle mover Stephon Diggs is at this point in his career, but it's a solid addition. And then, Kyle Williams through the draft. And I think there will be a chance for a few of these young guys who will have a chance to take that next step. And Demario Douglas and who knows, maybe one of Kendrick Bourne or Jalen Polk or Javon Baker steps up as well. But I think there's more potential here for year 2 Drake Maye for sure.
Fair. I do think he can improve this season. I'm just not sure it'll be enough to make him a top 12 fantasy quarterback in that you want to be starting him.
Sure.
He was just so consistent last year. He was getting between 200 and 290 yards each week, was scoring a touchdown in every game that he was playing, at least 30% of snaps. So he was like right there in terms of being a fantasy starter. But it was right at the low end of being a fantasy starter. So he was quarterback 12 to 18 every week outside of his first 2, where he was a top 10 fantasy quarterback those 2 weeks. But then every week after, it was in that 12 to 18 range. So I do think he can be better. His rushing upside definitely is there with his scrambling, 3.5 scrambles per game, which was second most among quarterbacks. They did have a bunch of additions, like you said, on the offensive line, at the receiving group, but still, when the non-fantasy part of our website did their group rankings, the offensive line are ranked 29th in the league, their receiving group ranked 31st. So even though they added players, it's either rookies or guys who are over 30 who we don't know how well they'll do. It seems like it'll help in the short term, but it's unclear how much it'll help in the long term. So in terms of like strategy of what I'm doing with Maye, if I'm in a super flex league, having a second quarterback who's consistently in that quarterback 12 to quarterback 18 range is definitely nice to have, because you know that he's going to be successful for you each week. But in a redraft league, when we're talking about guys like Michael Penix, JJ McCarthy, Trevor Lawrence, all these guys who have been more inconsistent, but we know have those big spike weeks where I don't know if Maye has those spike weeks. If I'm drafting two quarterbacks, I might want guys who might have those spike weeks and just start whoever's playing the worst defense, where Maye seems like the perfect quarterback for, hey, I drafted someone early, I need insurance if they get hurt, or just that bye week replacement. So in a single quarterback league, I'm not sure how much I'm getting Maye, but super flex leagues, definitely happy to. Or like I said, if I'm getting a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson early, then I think Maye is that pretty safe backup that you can have on your bench for the bye week or in case of an injury.
Yeah, no, that it's a fair point, right? And I think one of the other like aspects of it too, like you mentioned, is a little bit of, banking on the rushing ability as well, right? I think that's one of the maybe advantages that he holds over maybe other potential breakout candidates like a Michael Penix or Bryce Young or somebody like that, is just his willingness to take off and run and to do a good job of it. But yeah, it was the case last year, and it was the case coming out of college as well, where he was like 95th percentile in scramble rate coming out of college, averaging 8.9 rush attempts per game, which is huge. And that did translate a fair bit into year one, right, where he was seeing a 10.7% scramble rate. That was second behind only Jaden Daniels for quarterbacks who had at least 100 dropbacks, and then 4 runs per game as well. So he added an additional 4.5 fantasy points per game just through his rushing alone. So I think if the offense improves, like you said, it's an improved offense. It's not a great offense still. There's a lot of work to be done. But if there's any improvement at all, and Maye becomes a little bit more comfortable in the NFL, I think those scramble numbers and the rushing production have plenty of room for improvement as well, especially as he cleans up the fumbling issues as well. I think he tied for the league lead with like 6 lost fumbles last year in 2024. So those are going to hurt your fantasy points as well, especially if you're in leagues that penalize you pretty hard for lost fumbles. So there's a few areas of improvement for sure, especially in New England, but I feel still pretty excited about Maye. But like you said, definitely more as a QB2 right now, who maybe could push for that kind of low-end QB1 type production in year 2.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes the season as like quarterback 12 in terms of points, but it comes from getting a lot of quarterback 11, a quarterback 12, quarterback 13 finishes. So you don't necessarily want him in your lineup, but he ends up with those points, which is why I'm okay with him in super flex and a backup situation more so than if I want to rotate between two quarterbacks, whoever has the best matchup that week.
Yeah, no, makes perfect sense. So those are our quarterbacks. Let's move on to a couple running backs now that we think have a chance to break out, Nate, and start with a potential year 4 breakout in Kenneth Walker III of the Seattle Seahawks. We both have him as a top 12 pick in fantasy this year for his position. So tell us what's got you excited about his potential fantasy breakout this year.
Yeah, when you brought him up, I was surprised that he even qualified. But I guess with the injuries that he's had throughout his career, that's been the big negative against him. But he's been among our highest graded running backs, 91.3 rushing grade last season. So he was among the best. Avoiding tackles at a great rate, 0.42 avoided tackles per carry last season, was among the best we've seen out of a running back in the 19 years we've been doing this, right up there with 2014 Marshawn Lynch, 2020 Nick Chubb, some of the best running back seasons we've seen. So we know he's very talented, but durability has been the issue. He's been injured a lot and then has played through injury, so that's impacted his quality of play and a lot of the games that he's played. But he has been very good when given the opportunity. Clint Kubiak's his new offensive coordinator, which I think will be huge for him, consistently in the top 7 in terms of how often they run zone plays, which as been every place that he's gone. Kubiak's been in a lot of places recently, consistently having those zone runs. And Walker averages more yards per carry on zone runs than gap runs, 4.4 compared to 4.0. So that should help him be in a more zone-heavy offense. They've also just made it very clear that they want to run the ball a lot. They've converted 2 of their tight ends into fullbacks, a lot of 21 personnel. I think there will be a lot of focus on the run game this season. So, yeah, there's always the chance he gets hurt again, which won't be great for him. But if he stays healthy, I think he has that top 5 potential at running back based on this offense, based on his talent, based on how much I think they'll use him. So it just the issue of health. So you're taking a risk, but that risk is a top 5 running back versus a running back you can't start because he's injured.
Yeah, it's fair, right? And that's kind of why he qualified as a breakout candidate for me, right? Because he's always been on like the cusp of finishing as an RB1 on the season, but injuries have kind of held him back from that. And I look, every player is at risk of getting injured. Obviously, with Kenneth Walker, he missed 6 games last year, I think it was. He missed a couple in each of the previous 2 seasons before that. But I'm with you. I think, Kubiak coming in to this offense creates a lot of optimism for Seattle's top running back, which is Kenneth Walker, right? He's previously, Kubiak, that is, has been a part of offenses that have supported an RB1 in 2023 and then 2024 as well. And a large part of that success has come from involvement in the passing game as well, right? Like 2023, Christian McCaffrey, obviously you're going to throw him the ball. 2024, Alvin Kamara ranked, top 5 at the position in total targets, both of those guys. Those are obviously, receiving backs that we know are earning those targets, where Kenneth Walker, that hasn't typically been a big part of his game, at least during his first few seasons, but he took over that role last year in Seattle, setting a new career high in total targets with 52, which led the Seattle backfield despite him missing 6 games, and then Zach Charbonnet playing all 17 games. Charbonnet had 47. So that was a massive, I think, fantasy boost for Kenneth Walker last year, as he went from just 13.3 routes per game and 2.2 targets per game in 2023 to 20.4 routes per game and 4.7 targets per game in 2024. So he also earned a top 10 receiving grade and yards per route run for the position, both of which outperformed Charbonnet. So I think there's reason to believe that he can kind of continue dominating that role for Kubiak Seahawks in 2025. And like you said, yeah, on top of the early down work, right? Everything that he did last year, the setting the league high for missed tackles forced per attempt, and just having success as a runner, but now adding that receiving back ability to his game, I think puts him over the top for me, especially for where he's being drafted outside the top 12 running backs, typically around 15 or so. I think he has the chance to get into that top 10. And then, like you said, there's RB5, or higher potential in there as well, if he stays healthy, which is obviously a big part of it, right?
Yeah, and like you mentioned Charbonnet a bit there, and Charbonnet, he is someone that does better on gap runs than zone runs, so he is not quite as good of a fit for this offense, which is also part of the reason why I know I'm higher on Walker and lower on Charbonnet, because I'm not sure if he fits as well. Still think he's the handcuff, and with Kenneth Walker's injury history, completely understand wanting to get Charbonnet in case Walker gets injured, but I'm not concerned in a normal situation where both running backs are healthy. I think Walker is going to get the clear majority of the opportunities, and the 2-minute drill is the situation where he ended up playing a lot more last year, right, and went from no receptions to a lot there. So yeah. I think as long as he keeps that role, that'll also be big for him.
Yeah, it's huge. And then, Seattle's offense maybe gets a little bit better this year as well. We'll see how Sam Darnold performs in that offense. But they were kind of below average in like yards per play and offensive success rate, offensive points scored, red zone plays, all those things. But, Kenneth Walker, when he was in the lineup, he still found that RB1 success. He was averaging 16.5 PPR points per game, right? So, we just now need to kind of see it across an entire season for that breakout, that true breakout RB1 season to kind of come to fruition.
This year, John and I are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. My home league has been on Yahoo and will continue to be on Yahoo. While John is the IDP master, my home league has been using multiple starting spots for IDP, and I appreciate Yahoo's flexibility when it comes to IDP leagues, both when it comes to starting lineups and scoring settings. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins on August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League today at yahoofantasy.com/PFF. That's YAHOOFANTASY.com/PFF.
So I also put Bucky Irving on the list. And look, he had a great rookie season. I think so. Qualifying him as a breakout means that the expectation for year two really has to be even better than what we saw from him as a rookie, because he finished the season last year as the overall RB15 in PPR. And I think the belief heading into this year is that he's not going to just crack the top 12 fantasy running backs, but push for much higher and compete for, that high-end RB1 range this season. So one of the big things for me in putting Bucky Irving as a breakout is that he's going to have control of the backfield from week one, which wasn't the case for him last season. We're looking for around 1,400 yards combined as a minimum from scrimmage as both a runner and receiver. He did reach that mark last year, barely, right? 1,430, and that was without getting, the full workload until basically the latter half of the season, right? So, we look at his games last year, exactly half of his regular season games during the fantasy season were fewer than double-digit carries, and most of them came in the first half of the season before he took over the backfield from Rachaad White. So, when you consider just the second half of last season, I think that could be considered a breakout in and of itself for Bucky Irving. But I think projecting that usage and production across an entire season where we can get optimistic enough for him to be a true RB1 and for this entire season. Like if you look week 10 on last year, when his opportunities improved and he became more consistent, he ranked 7th in both rushing yards and receiving yards, and he was the PPR RB7, right? So if he continues on that pace in year two, we're comfortably looking at him returning that mid-range RB1 fantasy potential or higher. So really feeling good about his opportunity this season. But yeah, how about you? Where are you at with Bucky Irving?
I'm high on him. I view him as a mid-second round pick, ahead of him on ADP. It feels weird talking about him as a breakout because it felt like he did it at the end of last year, but I let it slide because I'm so high on him anyway. We talk about his talent. He's among the highest graded running backs, both as a runner and as a receiver. So I think that receiving part is big. Also avoided tackles per attempt, both in the run game as well as avoided tackles per route run in the pass game, among the top in the league last season. So I think he's great in both situations. And like you talked about him from week 10 on, but his usage improved even in week 18 and the playoffs. He was playing nearly 100% of snaps on early downs, 100% of the short yardage and goal line situations. So his usage got even better and better even after the fantasy season was over. And then it was White taking the third down snaps. There really weren't many 2-minute drill opportunities there, but White did get those. So Irving did get the role that you like to see out of a running back, a better role than what like Derrick Henry has in Baltimore, similar to a lot of other of those top running backs in the league. So for me, like the only thing holding him back from that top tier of running backs, the Jahmyr Gibbs, the Bijan Robinson, is probably the offensive line, where we see Atlanta have a top offensive line, Detroit, San Francisco, even if they aren't quite as good as they were, still around top 5 offensive line. The Buccaneers have a good line. They had everyone healthy last year, played at least 950 snaps. Doesn't sound like that'll be the case this year with Wirf's injury, but he's someone who was excellent in pass protection, not so great at run blocking. So if that injury does take time, I don't think it'll impact Irving's efficiency, but it could impact the Buccaneers offense as a whole, which therefore could lead to fewer touchdowns.
Yeah, it's a good point. And like you said, just for how good Bucky Irving was last year too, like top 10 rushing grade and receiving grade, I think one of the most impressive things for me about that was when you consider his stature, right? He's like 5'9", he's sub 200 pounds, which is small for a running back, right? And what he did still with his touches was so impressive. He led the position in yards after contact per attempt, 3.93, and he was top 5 in missed tackles forced per attempt as well at 0.28. So again, just continuing to play at that high level in year two can make up for a lot of the inefficiencies like maybe around him. And we'll see what happens with Tristan Wirfs as well, like you said. But everything for Bucky Irving, like what he was able to do with the ball in his hands was so impressive. And I get excited about thinking about that for an entire season. And because it even translated to like the high scoring areas of the field, which again isn't a role that's often given to a smaller back. But his, again, talent and the workload it increased, and it translated to the red zone and around the goal line, even over Rachaad White, who is a bigger running back, right? He cleared Rachaad White in goal to go touches 25-16 and red zone touches 50-32, right? So the team just continuing to trust Bucky Irving in that role, I think is going to really help him build on a great year one and this breakout year two that I'm expecting and we're expecting, and build on even 8 rushing touchdowns from last season as well, and just fulfill that, RB1 potential there.
Yeah. With the one concern is they did change offensive coordinators. Right. It sounds like everything they've said is they want to keep things how they left things off last year, which is great to see. And if that is the case, then that's great for his fantasy value. The fact that it's a new offensive coordinator maybe means he sees more playing time. Maybe he does get those third down snaps that he wasn't getting last year because he was such a good receiver. And even though Rachaad White improved last season, Bucky Irving is just so much better in terms of what we've seen in terms of our grades and everything. So a chance they might be more balanced because it's a new offensive coordinator, but there's also a chance that it's even better than what we were saying. So it does add a little bit of risk, but it's worth noting at least.
Absolutely. Yeah, very excited about Bucky Irving. And we'll get into some of our other breakout candidates here in just a second, but I do want to let everybody know that this episode is brought to you by Fabric by Gerber Life. Now is still a great time to reevaluate financial goals, not just for yourself, but for your kids. Now is the perfect time to make sure your kids are on a path toward a solid financial future. A kid's investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life is quick and simple to set up and lets you invest in their future now for education, big milestones, and more. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. Kids can't invest when they're minors, but a kid's investment account allows you to invest on their behalf now, giving their investments more time to grow. It's all online, and setting up an account can take you just 5 minutes. Then you can manage your child's account and monitor their investments right from your phone. Funds can be used for nearly anything, benefiting your child from tuition and tutors to music classes. And when they're adults and out on their own, they can use the funds for anything they need. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy, MEET fabric.com/fantasy. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors, Inc. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, Nate, let's get into the wide receivers now. A group that I'm excited about. We've gone back to the 2024 rookie class well here for both of our picks. But let's start off with Marvin Harrison Jr. What's got you excited about a potential breakout for Harrison Jr. this season?
Sure. So last season started as a disappointment. He only had 65 receiving yards or more in 3 games, which was not great to see. He finished the season on a high note, at least 11 receptions for 159 yards and a touchdown over his final 2 games. So that was good to see. And in terms of his targets, he had 114 on the season. That was top 20 for wide receivers. If he gets that again and is more productive on those targets, then he's going to have a fine season. But 45 of those targets were uncatchable, the most for wide receivers, which was not great to see, at least in terms of percentages and those things. So a big thing is just the chemistry with Kyler Murray. We see the Cardinals offense, and they kept so much the same. The running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, slight changes on the offensive line, coaching staff's the same. So the Cardinals, one of the most consistent offenses from last year to this year, outside of the Bengals being the other one that kept nearly everything the same. So a lot of it's just how he does with Kyler Murray. We've generally seen uncatchable target rate not be the most consistent thing from one year to the next. So that leaves some optimism that just natural regression should get Harrison a bit more fantasy value, but hopefully he can gain chemistry with Murray and have that be either average or above average, in which case with his 114 targets, maybe even more targets this year in his second season, that puts him in the top 15 fantasy wide receivers if that happens. So certainly think he can be top 20 fantasy wide receiver, clear top wide receiver in the offense, not much competition for targets in the wide receiver room. So I think he has a high floor regardless. It's hard to think of him doing worse this season than last season, barring injury.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? Like, undoubtedly last year as a rookie could be considered a disappointment, right? He was like a fringe first-round pick, depending on the format, and he finished as the PPR wide receiver 33, right? So when you compare him, his rookie year to Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. and Ladd McConkey even, like, it was a disappointing season for the most part. But like you said, the targets were there, right? 114 total targets as a rookie. That was top 20 among wide receivers in the league, which when you look at the top 20 wide receivers in targets, that yielded an average of 237.2 PPR points among that group of wide receivers as a whole. So that's like low end wide receiver one numbers right out the bat, right? So even if you just look at the wide receivers who ranked 14 to 20 in targets, excluding Marvin Harrison Jr., the average fantasy point total from that many targets was 214.4 PPR points, still well above Marvin Harrison's Jr. 181, right? So that is closer to that mid-range wide receiver too, like you mentioned. And I realize that this may be jumping through hoops to give, make my point, but the overall point here is that there's too much meat left on the bone for Marvin Harrison Jr.'s potential as a rookie. And not all of it was his fault. Like you said, the uncatchable target rate was a massive part of it. But also the fact that he could get even better in year two and earn more targets is just, I think that there's no reason to feel down about Marvin Harrison Jr. after year one. We put that behind us. We're expecting a much better year. And like you said, the catchable target rate thing, it is, relatively unstable year to year, even with the same quarterback. So just having another full offseason with Kyler Murray in a consistent offense, like you said, very few changes there. So I think there's definitely potential here. I mean, we look at, Marvin Harrison Jr. coming out of college, one of the best wide receiver prospects in recent years. It was a 91.3 career PFF receiving grade. That was 94th percentile among wide receiver prospects since 2019, and 2.98 career yards per route run was 93rd percentile. So obviously several of Harrison's 2024 rookie peers have already kind of surpassed him in ADP, but I don't think there's reason to believe that he can't get back there and potentially even get back on top of that group coming out of year two here. So still feeling very excited about Marvin Harrison Jr. for sure.
Fair. And then your next one is another top 10 wide receiver from that class.
Yeah, so the other top 10 wide receiver from the 2024 class is Rome Odunze of the Chicago Bears. And look, another rookie season wasn't amazing, but I think the expectations were a lot different for Odunze in year one because he had Keenan Allen and DJ Moore in that offense. We expected him to be third on the team in targets in that offense, and he was, right? And now with Keenan Allen gone and also DJ Moore coming off a career worse PFF receiving grade, he had a 73.3. I'm feeling optimistic that Odunze's potential to finish as the wide receiver one in Chicago is at a great point right now. And the main thing is going to be, though, for obvious reasons, fending off all the target competition, right? Because there's a lot now in Chicago. Being the wide receiver one in that offense is going to be easier said than done. There are more mouths to feed here than even during Odunze's rookie season. So the additions of Colston Loveland, Luther Burden III are pretty significant for the passing game. But I think now with Odunze now has a year of seniority on them and experience in the NFL, which is it does become important, right? And just another year of rapport with quarterback Caleb Williams as well. So now these new additions, they have the favorable fact that they were selected by this new coaching regime and not just inherited like Odunze was, but Ben Johnson has talked about being impressed by Rome Odunze coming out of the NFL draft even. So there's a chance that he's the odd man out with this regime, but I think considering the talent, the former top 10 pick, the investment in him as an organization, I think he's just as likely to be the prime beneficiary of this new and improved Chicago offense that we've been talking about with Caleb Williams, but he has to fit into Ben Johnson's scheme, and that's going to be crucial, right? He's likely going to start the year opposite DJ Moore as the wide receiver too, but I think depending on how well he learns the new playbook and is able to translate that knowledge into success on the field, that role can grow to eventually overtake DJ Moore as the wide receiver one, playing maybe a similar role to like Amon-Ra St. Brown in the Detroit Lions offense from the past few seasons with Detroit under Ben Johnson. Now, St. Brown's role in Johnson's offense has asked for him to play a little more than half of his slots out, or half of his routes out of the slot, right? And that's something that, DJ Moore is typically closer to the average slot receiver size, right? But I don't think we should rule Odunze out of that spot yet. Like, if you look at 2024, Odunze ran a higher rate of routes from the slot than DJ Moore, and he was even a little bit more effective in that role as well, right? So 350 receiving yards for Odunze out of the slot, 256 for Moore, 1.55 yards per route run, 1.37 for Moore, 14.6 yards per reception, 8 for Moore, and then an 8.4% first down and touchdown rate out of the slot compared to 7% for DJ Moore. So it's a small sample, but on a little bit more routes than Moore. He was more efficient, at least in his rookie season, working out of the slot, and then just adding in that potential, for that year 2 development and this improved offense under Ben Johnson, another year of rapport with Caleb Williams. I feel really good about the potential breakout for Rome Odunze. And the main thing for me here is that a lot of the value that we're betting on is the high ceiling, right? Where he could potentially be getting with Odunze, where he's being drafted outside of the top 30 right now at his position. But if he can win that top receiving role in this offense, it's one that if it hits big, right? And even if it's, a tougher breakout path than, say, like a Marvin Harrison Jr., for example, it's one that I find myself wanting to take a swing on. And I think the price is about right to entice me to do that and feel pretty good about it.
Fair. I agree with you. I think that ceiling is there. I'm probably a little less optimistic about the percentage chance that he reaches that ceiling. We talk about the numbers a lot, and we basically didn't touch any of his 2024 numbers at all. You mentioned them once we got to the slot numbers, but in my notes as well, it's like we talk about his college numbers, which were really good, which made him a top 10 draft pick. And then there were a couple of games there where he had some nice stats in there, like 6 receptions, 112 yards, and a touchdown in week 3, 104 yards and week 9, but there wasn't really much else last season. And like you said, they drafted the 2 receivers with their first 2 picks, and in my mind, I think their thought was not moving on from Odunze, but thinking that he'd be the 4th option in the offense. And then you did mention the quote by their new head coach, Ben Johnson, said he's extremely impressed with Odunze so far. And then also later in that same interview said, I think we're going to see a lot of growth from him. So I think their thought process was that Odunze might not be the best fit, but from what they've seen on Odunze, they might get him more involved. So I'm curious to see how their scheme ends up looking with these receivers, because I came to the conclusion that I think Odunze better fits the Tim Patrick, Josh Reynolds role, just based on his size and speed and what we've seen in the past. I know you mentioned DJ Moore had his worst season last year, but in the past, he's never been the clear slot receiver for the team, or the Panthers as well, going back that far, but he has played better in the slot in some past years. So I think he's capable of playing there. Burden's certainly capable of playing there. So I'm not sure how much Odunze will play in the slot, but I also don't know how much this offense will necessarily resemble the Lions offense and how much Ben Johnson will change things to fit the strengths of his current receivers. So it'll definitely be interesting to see, but like you said, he has the talent. We saw it in college. The offense should be a lot better, and there's a chance Odunze is the top guy if DJ Moore continues to take a step back from what we've seen earlier in his career. He is a pretty average wide receiver 1 for an offense, but that still leaves room for Odunze to be a potential top 10 wide receiver in the league, which is within the realm of possibility. So I think there's a chance that it happens, but I also think there's plenty of situations that can happen in between, and also a chance where he's the 4th option in the offense, with DJ Moore playing in the slot, Burden playing a decent role in the offense, Loveland as well. So wide range of possibilities, but based on the ADP, like you were saying, you're drafting him for his upside, and there's a chance he gets there. And when you look at other wide receivers in the range, there's less of a path to an excellent season for them.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? And I'm with you. Like my immediate reaction coming out of like the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft was that I hated it for Odunze, right? I was really bummed out about it. But kind of as the offseason has kind of gone on here, I felt a little bit more comfortable about it, and maybe talking myself a little bit into it as well, right? So there's this, hopium attached to Odunze's breakout season, because like you said, I mean, Luther Burden could very well be in that role. Colston Loveland could be very well in that, top receiving role. DJ Moore as well. Obviously, we're not going to rule him out, right? So it's this ambiguous group that I think I want to take a shot on and hope that it hits big. but I'm betting on the talent, the top 10 potential that Odunze was drafted to be, for him to kind of be the guy that emerges there with everything, coming together here in year 2 with this offense. So still feeling pretty excited about him. And obviously the main thing is, like you mentioned at the end there, is the price is right? You're taking him at wide receiver 33 or somewhere around there a lot of the time. So feeling pretty excited about that, getting that potential value boost in drafts if I can hit on him for sure. But let's wrap up with the tight end breakout candidates now, Nate. And we are going to talk about the first player on the list, which is Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills. What do you like about his potential heading into 2025?
Sure. So we saw his rookie season. He played very well. At times, he had a stretch where he had 14 PPR points per game, which was very good for a tight end, typically in the top 6. Also ended the season very strong, 2 games over 80 yards. And then last season was mostly a season to forget, but it sounds like the injuries were worse than they let on throughout the season. Quotes by the coaching staff, quotes by the GM, both blamed a lot of what happened last season due to injury. Different coaches and GM and different interviews brought up his confidence and how he has his confidence back this offseason. They mentioned the injuries as well. Joe Brady also said that he's lived in the facility this offseason, so there's been a lot of talk of the injuries being the problem last year. He has his confidence back. We know he has the talent. We saw it in college. We saw it in his rookie season. There's still concern that Buffalo likes to spread the ball around a lot. They have a bunch of wide receivers. They still have Dawson Knox. They still have a good run game, so all that's in place. But we saw at times them wanting to get Kincaid on the field more often, which is good to see, as well as get him the ball often. So I'm willing to throw out a lot of his last year numbers. It's also worth noting he's another guy who had a high uncatchable target rate last season, which is even more surprising with Josh Allen at quarterback. So I think that uncatchable target rate will get better, which will also help his stats. So I'd blame the injury and blaming that on his routes in general, and that probably impacted the uncatchable target rate of him getting to where he needs to go correctly. So I expect a lot of that to be cleaned up this season. So I think he should be a top 10 fantasy tight end. I know he's not currently getting drafted as a top 10 fantasy tight end, so he's one of the guys where if I don't end up with one of those top 3 players, then I'm definitely targeting him, probably getting a second tight end just in case. But still, I think you can get him later, get another tight end later, and be happy at the position if you missed out on the top 3.
Yeah, no, this is a good one because I had Kincaid as a breakout candidate last year. It didn't work out, so that obviously scared me a little bit from putting him on the list this year. But I agree that he's capable of getting to that top 10 tight end range, like you said, especially considering that, one of the biggest detriments to his game last year, the same as Marvin Harrison Jr., even a little bit to Rome Odunze, we didn't talk about it, but was that catchable target rate. 66% catchable target rate. That ranked 4th percentile for the position last year and basically eliminated about 100 receiving yards and 10 receptions if you're basing it on the average number of his peers and on those missed targets. And again, the instability of catchable target rate as well, kind of on full display here as well, because in 2023, he saw a catchable target rate of 88% with the same quarterback, obviously, in Josh Allen, right? So just getting back closer to that range will be a big boost for his fantasy production. Being healthy as well is a big part of it. So, I mean, and just being the potential top target in a Josh Allen offense, I think all those things make him very enticing in drafts, considering that he's being taken outside the top 12 at his position right now. And I think one of the better bets to finish well within that range in 2025.
Yeah, I think both with him and Kenneth Walker, it's worth remembering, we often are willing to accept a player who misses time due to injury, but if a player plays bad but plays through the injury, right, we still count his stats against him. So as long as we remember, okay, this guy was hurt, it's okay that he didn't play as well during this time, then I think it makes a bit more sense compared to a guy who misses a season and we're like, okay, he's going to bounce back and be the player he was, versus Michael Pittman's another player that comes to mind that he played through back injury last year. There was talk of them shutting him down last season, right, but he played through it. His numbers weren't as good as past years, but I think he can bounce back as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Great call there. So we'll wrap up here with my last breakout candidate at the tight end position, which admittedly a more hopeful one than some of the other options, but I went with Isaiah Likely of the Baltimore Ravens because this is definitely one that I'm banking on projection here, because Mark Andrews being in this offense poses a significant threat to playing time and targets as the top Ravens receiving tight end and a lot of the times top receiving option in that offense. But the hope for me for Likely comes from the fact that Andrews has obviously aged and I think declined in both playing time and some efficiency metrics. Not all. He's still very good. I think Likely has the opportunity really to kind of increase his role in this offense while eventually taking over the tight end one role this year. Mark Andrews, he's been the subject of trade rumors and stuff like that. Obviously, that would be huge for Likely's breakout potential, but we don't need to get too much into that. But I do want to talk about his increased role as a receiver, because since Likely was drafted, Andrews' playing time as a receiver has steadily decreased, right, each year, while Likely's role has kind of grown to the point that by 2024 season's end, these guys were nearly even in splits in playing time there. So I put a chart in the article. We probably throw it up for the graphic on the YouTube crowd, but for the audio crowd as well, I'll kind of walk through it a little bit just to kind of highlight what I'm talking about. But before Isaiah Likely was drafted, the year before, Andrews was averaging 36.7 routes per game. Then in 2022, which was year one of Isaiah Likely, we saw a dip for Andrews from 36.7 routes per game to 28.9. Likely was at 16.7. Likely stayed at 16.7 routes per game the next year, but Andrews saw another dip, this time to 27.8. And then last year was the most significant dip, as Andrews went all the way down to 21.1 routes per game. Likely increased to 19.3. So very, very nearly an even split between the two. So despite Andrews' history of being, high-end receiving option and often the team leader in receiving production, the fact of the matter is these two players are kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of their NFL careers, right? And that intersection of playing time last year, I think, is a good indication of maybe even the Ravens recognizing that. So I think there's potential for Likely to surpass Andrews in 2025. The Ravens as a team are also one that run a high rate of 2 tight end looks, right? So that helps for sure. More than any team in the league, basically. They led the NFL in 22 personnel percentage, and they ranked top 5 in 12 personnel percentage, which I don't think it's going to change much in 2025 considering the coaching staff there. But helping Likely's potential in that regard is that he ultimately ended up with more playing time than Andrews in those 2 tight end situations overall when both players were in the lineup. So Likely ran 94% of the team's routes in those situations. Andrews ran 85% of the routes with 2 tight ends on the field. So these snaps for the Ravens specifically account for nearly half, 44% of the team's passing down snaps. So if Likely can cut into that even more from Andrews, or maybe even more in his 11 personnel routes as well, like that's where Andrews kind of held the edge. But then I think that subtle shift toward Likely as the top receiving option would be a lot more noticeable for fantasy in 2025.
Oh, yeah. I think Likely's definitely a huge gamble. He's among the top 12 or 13 graded tight ends the past couple years in terms of receiving grades. So he has the talent to be a fantasy starter. Like you said, Mark Andrews, it has been the huge roadblock to him getting there. It'll be interesting to see how those snaps play out this year. John Harbaugh did say he wants to see Likely be an all-pro, and in order for that to happen, he'd have to be the clear top guy. Yeah. And I think it just depends on how much more we see out of Likely, how much less we see out of Andrews. We know based on age, that's kind of the direction things are trending. I could see them doing a little bit less 2 tight end set with DeAndre Hopkins on the team. I think they will want to get him on the field a little bit more, and that was part of the reason they could run so much 2 tight end last year, is because they didn't have the same depth at wide receiver. But with Flowers and with Bateman and with Hopkins, we might see slightly less of both Andrews and Likely on the field at the same time. So it'll be interesting to see how that breaks out. It just depends on if Likely plays better. But for me, a lot of it just depends on your strategy of that. If you're picking Likely, it's near the end of the draft. You're getting a backup tight end. There's so many tight ends that we know who they are. We know they aren't as talented as Likely. We know they're not in as good of an offense as Likely. So like a Cade Otton comes to mind as someone who probability-wise will probably score more fantasy points than Likely this season if we see things play out similar to last season. But I would still rather have Likely because Otton isn't going to be in my fantasy starting lineup any week, where Likely should be in my fantasy starting lineup if things are going right for him. So I'd rather take that chance on Likely, and because of that, he's in my top 20 or so rankings. He is someone where I didn't initially write a player profile on him, and then once I was adjusting the rankings, I'm like, okay, Likely is much higher than all these other players that I did write player profiles on him. I need to write one on Likely. So that's up on the website right now if you want to read more of my thoughts on Likely or any of these other players. I've written about all of them. But I think there's a chance with Likely, and if he does become the starter, if Andrews gets traded, gets injured, then Likely is a must-start top 10 option at the position. It's just if he plays like 55% of 11 personnel snaps, 60% of 11 personnel snaps, I'm not sure at what point it's going to be enough, especially if Andrews remains the red zone target among their tight ends.
Yeah, it's a big part of it, right? Like Likely has to continue developing and basically just be too good to ignore, right? Like to increase that role. You know, if Harbaugh's talking about him being an all-pro, you know, we looked at Likely's numbers last year, top 10 marks at the position in receiving grade, yards per route run, missed tackles forced, yards after the catch per reception, and then even receiving touchdowns. So, you know, Mark Andrews is no slouch in those regards either, right? But you have this receiving weapon in Isaiah Likely that they have and hopefully can utilize in an increasingly larger role this year. And we'll see what happens, right? Because, you know, Mark Andrews, he has been the topic of trade rumors and things like that. And there might be teams out there that, who knows, maybe they want to take a shot on a tight end. I know Miami just traded Jonnu Smith. And look, I know they brought in Darren Waller, but let's be honest, we're not expecting him to be a big needle mover here. And then Mike McDonald has some familiarity with Mark Andrews from his time in Baltimore. He's over in Seattle right now. They maybe could use a starting tight end. I know they have Noah Fant, and we'll see what happens with like teams like Carolina. You know, if things go well with Bryce Young and they become this competitive offense and team, maybe they're looking for a veteran tight end to help that offense as well. So, you know, again, an Andrews trade, it's unlikely, and it's the ultimate likely breakout year result. But even with Andrews there, I do like that Isaiah Likely was trending in the right direction, and hopefully that he takes another step here in 2025.
Yep. Plus, injuries always happen, so a team could end up with a need for a tight end that doesn't have one right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you have it. Those are our top 2025 breakout candidates for fantasy football this season. Thank you all for tuning in and for watching. If you're on the YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And let us know, who are your favorite breakout candidates. Shout them out in the comments. I'd love to hear them. But Nate, thank you to you as well. And as always, good to see you. And this time in person. But please let everybody know what you got going on at pff.com.
Oh, yeah. So I have a good 15 articles going up each week, a bunch of ranking articles, draft strategy, as well as a bunch of top 5 lists. We're also very close to preseason snap counts. We got the Hall of Fame game end of the month. So excited for the preseason games to mess up all of these rankings. Maybe we likely see more snaps than Andrews with the Ravens starters in a game, and we can be even more excited about Likely then.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. That would be a lot of fun. And then as for me, I wrote up breakout candidates on the website, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. For the IDP crowd, we got defensive line, linebacker, defensive backs. We did an IDP breakout episode for the YouTube crowd as well. And then this week we got fantasy options to avoid at cost, fantasy bounce backs, IDP values and fades, things like that. Next week we'll start up the Dark Horse Fantasy Football position leader candidates, which is always a fun article for me to write each year. But thank you all again for tuning in. And until next time, peace out.